Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are absolutely shattering some seriously outdated financial myths to uncover the true, actual path to financial freedom. We're getting way beyond that generic advice to look at what brilliant financial minds and real entrepreneurs actually do to intentionally design their wealth. So, buckle up, because it's time to completely rewire how you think about your money, your career, and, honestly, your entire future.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Let's start with the number that just completely breaks conventional logic: 30 million. Back in 2003, professional heavyweight boxing champ Mike Tyson filed for bankruptcy and he was sitting on $30 million in debt. But wait, here is the real kicker. Over the course of his career, Tyson had actually brought in over $300 million.
So, we really have to ask ourselves, how in the world do you make $300 million and somehow end up $30 million in the red? I mean, it creates this massive cognitive dissonance, doesn't it? We spend our entire lives trying to acquire money, but this right here, this proves that your earning potential means absolutely nothing if your ability to manage your consumption is fundamentally broken. Honestly, production means zero if you've got a massive problem with consumption.
Which brings us to Section 1, the real rat race. Right now, Americans hold literally the highest credit card debt in human history. And if you look at a recent Career Builder study, 78% of all workers are living paycheck to paycheck. But now what's really interesting about this data is the real shocker. 1 in 10 workers making over $100,000 a year are stuck in the exact same boat. Even six-figure earners, people making well above the average cost of living, are completely, totally trapped.
So we definitely need to reframe our definition here. The rat race isn't just working a 9-to-5 job. Actually, scratch that. That's just a myth people use to sell you courses online. The real rat race is living on a financial edge. It's that awful mental turmoil of watching your income just vanish the absolute second it hits your bank account. It means your job isn't a choice anymore. It's a desperate necessity just to fund a lifestyle you barely even have the time to enjoy.
Moving on to Section 2, the psychology of consumption.
To achieve true financial freedom, we've got to look inward at the psychological traps that keep us locked in this incredibly vulnerable cycle. The first major trap: the ostrich effect. In behavioral finance, this is basically our tendency to just bury our heads in the sand because we want to avoid negative financial information out of pure fear. I mean, it is exactly that sick knot in your stomach you get when you refuse to check your bank balance on a Sunday morning after a really heavy weekend of spending. We avoid the truth simply because the truth hurts.
And then we have hyperbolic discounting. This is basically your brain convincing you to buy those new expensive shoes today instead of putting that exact same cash toward an investment that, actually buys your future financial freedom. We are quite literally hardwired to favor immediate, short-term rewards over the much greater, life-changing rewards we could get in the future.
And of course, there's the overwhelming pressure of society, social proof, keeping up with the Joneses, the desperate, almost constant need for social approval. Today, the Joneses aren't just your literal neighbors, they are right there in your pocket, on your social media feeds 24/7. We tend to measure our self-worth by other people's opinions, and that causes us to prioritize looking rich over actually being financially free. You really have to ask yourself, do you care more about appearing to have money or actually having it?
So to break free, you absolutely must master your consumption before you can even think about scaling your income. Here's the actionable framework. First, bring real awareness to your habits by journaling your monthly expenses. Second, budget ruthlessly so you can systematically live below your means. And third, save up a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Do this before you invest a single dime. This right here, this is what builds your absolute fortress against the rat race.
All right, Section 3, redefining money as value.
Once you've got your consumption under control, everything shifts. The whole narrative arc changes. But look, if you've been living paycheck to paycheck, you might have developed a pretty toxic relationship with money. You might even view it as something inherently bad. We really need to internalize this incredibly powerful concept. Money is an expression of value. It's not the root of all evil, it's just a neutral medium of exchange. Acquiring immense wealth isn't about taking advantage of people, it is entirely about creating immense value for the market.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive mindset shift required. See, the passive consumer focus basically just tracks income versus expenses, kind of hoping for a few leftovers at the end of the month. But the active producer focus, that takes aggressive control. It's about radically minimizing consumption while obsessively finding ways to scale up your production and deliver way more value to society.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the producer mindset.
Now, frugality is great, don't get me wrong, but highly wealthy individuals, people like Graham Stephan or Dave Ramsey, they don't get rich just by clipping coupons or skipping their morning coffee. They follow a very specific blueprint. They find a problem in the market, they create a solution, and then they sell that solution at mass scale. Whether that's creating personal finance videos on YouTube for millions of people, or building a software app that solves a specific pain point, this is exactly how you exponentially grow your production equation.
Robert Kiyosaki highlights a really deep contrast here. Taking a paycheck basically programs you with an employee mindset. It seeks security and relies on a steady paycheck, which ironically just makes you a slave to money. The entrepreneur mindset, on the other hand, seeks absolute freedom. When you strip away the safety net of a paycheck, it forces you to get hungrier, it makes you smarter, and it truly tests your character and skill to create actual value.
Now for Section 5, the rules of the wealthy.
So big business and the wealthy, they operate on a completely different set of financial rules than the middle class. Go to school, get a job, work hard, save your money, get out of debt, and invest in the stock market for the long term, right? We have all heard this. Well, so the crucial point is, according to Kiyosaki, this traditional list of advice is currently the most obsolete, dangerous financial idea being taught today. It is literally a formula from a totally bygone era.
Take a look at this really jarring quote. Savers are losers and cash is trash. I know, it sounds super harsh, but it completely shatters the myth that simply saving your money in a traditional bank account is going to magically lead to financial freedom. And why is that? It's because the macroeconomic rules of money have fundamentally changed.
Let's actually look at the macroeconomic timeline here. Back in 1971, President Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard, and in that very moment, money effectively became debt. Fast forward to today, and central banks are printing trillions of dollars. All this endless printing, it causes massive inflation. So if you're just hoarding cash in a bank somewhere, inflation and taxes are actively crushing your purchasing power. The banks literally do not want your cash. They are essentially charging you just to save it.
Which brings us to the ultimate secret of the wealthy. Debt and taxes make the rich richer and make the poor and middle class poorer. While traditional financial experts are out there telling the middle class to scramble out of debt, the wealthy are actively learning how to absolutely leverage it. For example, Kiyosaki recently refinanced $300 million in debt, dropping his interest rate from 5% to 2.5%. That move massively increased his monthly cash flow, and it was completely tax-free.
The reality becomes painfully clear when you compare two different people, both making $1 million. A high-income earner, like, say, a doctor working for a salary, gets absolutely creamed by taxes, maybe taking home around $400,000. But a real estate entrepreneur who acquires assets using bank debt, they legally pay zero taxes and keep the full million. They control their income and they control their taxes. It's a completely different game.
Ultimately, achieving true financial freedom isn't about perfectly timing the external stock market or just waiting around for the perfect macroeconomic conditions. As this quote beautifully states, there's no such thing as a bad economy. We all have an internal economy. See, the average person looks at a downturn and totally panics because their external economy dictates their whole life. But a true entrepreneur, they control their internal focus, knowing they can generate value in literally any economy.
So I want to leave you with this final, absolutely vital question. Are you building your internal economy, or are you just surviving the external one? It's time to make a choice. Stop letting your consumption dictate your future. It's time to shift your mindset from consumer to producer, learn the real rules of wealth, and intentionally design your own financial freedom. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, get out there and keep building your value.